Hey guys, tonight we're not lounging on memory foam or sipping chamomile tea. No, tonight you're wrapped in an itchy wool blanket inside a smoky Viking longhouse, sandwiched between a snoring uncle and someone's feet that definitely kicked over the chamber pot last night. Your bed is straw, your pillow is a rolled up tunic, and your dreams were interrupted by someone muttering in their sleep about Odin's goats. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your local time and location in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir before the sun rises, not because you're particularly ambitious, but because the longhouse is never truly quiet. Someone's baby is fussing. The fire has died down to coals. The thatch above your head drips from the night's condensation, and someone else's foot just poked you in the kidney. The stench of sweat, smoke, and sour milk is somehow both overwhelming and familiar. Waking in a Viking village doesn't involve an alarm clock. Your internal clock is set to survive or starve. If you don't rise early, you might miss the one chance to eat, or get assigned to the worst chore, like scooping waste out of the trench latrine with a broken paddle. The first thing you do is stretch your stiff limbs and cough out the smoke you've been breathing all night. The longhouse has no chimney. Instead, there's a narrow smoke hole that's less a ventilation system and more of a suggestion. Your eyes sting, your throat scratches, and you already need to wash, which is ironic, since washing isn't exactly a Viking daily ritual, at least not the full soap and loofah kind. Still, don't let the filth fool you. Vikings had a surprising obsession with grooming. You grope around for your personal grooming kit, tweezers, ear spoon, comb, all tucked in a small leather pouch. It's like your ancient Nordic toiletry bag, minus the moisturizer. Archaeologists have found these kits in nearly every grave, which either means grooming was vital, or people were really afraid of earwax in the afterlife. Someone stokes the hearth, and smoke billows up again. You rise and shuffle forward, rubbing your arms. It's cold, even in summer. The fire's warmth feels like a divine blessing. You kneel to help, prodding the embers with a charred stick and blowing gently until sparks dance like tiny fireflies. Every house has a hearth goddess. Your family may whisper a quiet "thank you" to her as the flames rise. Historians still argue whether this practice was more superstition or a core piece of Viking folk religion. But either way, you're not taking chances. A few others stir, your older brother stretches and yawns like a bear, and your aunt starts whispering to her daughter about the weather and whether the goats are limping again. There's no privacy here. The longhouse is communal. You sleep, eat, argue, and snore all in the same elongated wooden box. It's as cozy as it is chaotic. Outside, a rooster cries, late, as usual, and the faintest sliver of daylight begins to creep in through the hide-flap door. You steel yourself to step into the cold, where dew clings to every blade of grass in your boots, still damp from yesterday, offer all the insulation of 2 wet socks taped to your feet. You slip them on anyway. There's work to do. The village is already coming alive. Smoke curls from other longhouses. Someone's shouting about missing firewood. A dog barks. A baby cries. And in the distance, you hear the thunk of an axe meeting wood, over and over, like the heartbeat of this stubborn little outpost in the wilderness. You wipe the crust from your eyes and take one last deep breath before trudging toward the well. It's just another day, and it's only just begun. The fire's going now, barely. You've got smoke in your hair, your eyes are still watering, and you're pretty sure that ember burn on your forearm is going to sting all day. But the hearth goddess has been fed, the longhouse is warmish, and the day is marching forward whether you're ready or not. Your next task is one you hate the most: water, fetching it, from the well, with a bucket that leaks just enough to make your sleeves soggy by the time you return. You heave open the hide flap and step outside into the chilly dawn. The air is sharp with dew and animal breath. Chickens cluck underfoot. The grass squishes as you walk. Everything's damp. You trudge past the goat pen, eyes avoiding that one goat who once bit your cousin's nose, and toward the wooden frame that shelters the well. Lower the bucket, wait for the splash, pull it back up with arms that still ache from yesterday's hauling, repeat. Spill half of it on your tunic anyway. This is your version of a morning shower, freezing, inefficient, and strangely invigorating. You splash your face for good measure. Congratulations. You're awake. Back at the Longhouse, your aunt is scraping the last of last night's porridge out of a cauldron. It's crusty, gray, and absolutely not the oat milk and honey fantasy you might have had in mind. She adds a little water, a little milk if there's any left, and reheats it with a sprinkle of dried seaweed, Viking seasoning. And you thought your high school cafeteria was rough. Before breakfast, though, comes another task: keeping the fire alive, not for warmth now, but for cooking. You feed it carefully. Wood is precious, and your little village doesn't exactly have a lush forest growing in the backyard. Driftwood, peat, or dried dung might have to do. The smell is memorable. Eventually, breakfast happens. You eat sitting on the floor, on a stool if you're lucky, with one hand and without ceremony. It's usually gruel, barley, rye, maybe some dried berries if someone found a stash. You share a horn cup of thin buttermilk with your sister, who drinks like she's racing a thunder god. Your youngest brother just picks at his food and stares at the fire like it holds secrets. He's 3. It might. Sometimes there's dried fish. If so, it's tough as old rope and smells like someone smoked a boot. Other times, if yesterday's hunt went well, there's meat, bits of boiled rabbit or bird. On a very lucky day, you might get a sliver of cheese, the hard kind you need a knife to eat. You once bit straight into it and nearly cracked a tooth. Lesson learned: meals are communal and chaotic. No plates, no forks, just hands, shared bowls, and the occasional sharp elbow if someone reaches too fast. The dog gets the scraps, unless someone else eats them first. Everyone eats fast. No lingering. There's too much to do. You scrape your bowl with a bit of crust, mop up the last of the gruel, and hand it to your older cousin, who washes dishes by dumping them in a wooden tub and sloshing them with last week's lye soap. Is it hygienic? Probably not. Is it better than no soap? Historians still argue about that. But even in this blur of grumbling and chewing, you notice something odd, a quiet ritual. Before eating, your grandmother muttered something under her breath and touched the rim of her bowl. A blessing? A spell? You're not sure. But you did the same, just in case. Because for all the gruff toughness of Viking daily life, superstition still clings to every action. You're careful not to whistle indoors, because that might summon spirits. You don't sweep after dark, or you'll sweep away your luck. And you never leave the hearth fire to go completely out, not because it's inconvenient to relight, but because it might insult the ancestors. You swallow the last bite, lick your fingers, and stretch your arms. Your back pops. You're 12. You feel 40. Welcome to Viking ergonomics. The longhouse smells like damp wool, wet ash, and goat, but at least it's warm. You step outside again to shake off the drowsiness. You're not a child anymore. Not really. And after breakfast, everyone has a role to play. Today, yours will be something horrible. Probably. Maybe dung spreading. Maybe eel trap checking. You glance toward the barn and hope no one says the word latrine. But before orders are barked, you get a few minutes to breathe. You gaze toward the tree line, where the mist is just beginning to lift. The village looks like something out of a dream, or a bad watercolor painting. Turf-roofed houses, pens of shaggy animals, wood piles, piles of manure, and that one boat you're sure hasn't floated in years. And yet, for all the discomfort, the chaos, the sore limbs and sour milk, you feel something stir in your chest. This is your home, your day, your tiny village on the edge of nowhere. The sun finally peeks over the horizon. You stretch your arms, pop your jaw, and mutter, "Let's get it over with." You barely get a breath in before the day pounces on you like a hungry wolf. Your mother calls your name, sharp and loud, and points toward the barn with a look that says, "This is not a negotiation." You trudge toward it, boots squishing in mud that has aspirations of becoming quicksand. Today's breakfast is fighting back, not in your belly, but out in the pen. One of the goats has escaped. Again. It's the same one with the lazy eye and the tendency to climb things goats are absolutely not supposed to climb. Like roof beams in sleeping children, you sigh, you grab a stick, and you begin your noble morning quest, goat-wrangling, chasing livestock before 9 wasn't in your childhood dreams. But here you are, dodging horns, sliding in muck, and trying to outsmart a four-legged escape artist who somehow thinks it's a fun game. The goat leaps over a fence post. You do not. You eat dirt. Eventually, with help from your cousin and a strategically thrown turnip, the goat is cornered, leashed with rope, and dragged back to the pen with the reluctant dignity of a criminal on parade. That's when the chores really begin. You're sent to gather firewood. Not from the forest, which is too far, too dark, and full of trolls, well, mostly wolves, but it's all the same after dusk. But from the communal stack near the riverbank, you carry what you can, splintered birch logs, twisted roots, and the occasional bundle of dried peat. Viking villages didn't have a lot of spare forest around, especially in Iceland or Greenland. Wood was a treasure. Driftwood was more valuable than gold in some places. Historians still argue whether entire settlements relocated just to be nearer to steady wood sources. You, however, are mostly arguing with the weight of the log that's currently crushing your shoulder blade. Back at the Longhouse, the fire's burning low again. You toss in some wood. Smoke billows. Your eyes sting. Again. You've cried more from smoke this week than from emotions in your entire life. Once that's handled, you get sent to clean out the animal stalls. It's exactly as glamorous as it sounds. You grab the dung fork. Yes, that's a real thing. And start scraping. The smell is powerful. A mixture of sour hay, ancient urine, and something that makes your teeth ache just smelling it. There's no point covering your nose. The scent gets everywhere. In your clothes, your hair, your soul. You mutter prayers to Thor, Freyr, and possibly Loki, depending on whose fault you think this chore is. The animals watch you with complete indifference. After the mucking comes the mending. Nets for fishing need repair. You join the others by the side of the longhouse, fingers fumbling with twine and bone needles. It's peaceful for a moment, threading knots, fixing tears, and listening to the gossip around you. The woman next to you is talking about someone's dream. A raven flew into their house, then turned into a man. Omen or bad stew? The debate is lively. Someone else mentions that the jar of fermented herring went missing, and eyes are narrowed. Vikings didn't have a police force, but they had social pressure, communal memory, and the occasional trial by combat. In the meantime, it's mostly solved with stern looks and louder than necessary accusations. Suddenly, you're pulled off net duty and handed a bucket of grayish paste. Soap. Supposedly made from ashes and leftover fats. You are now responsible for scrubbing a wooden trough used for soaking wool. It smells like wet dog mixed with regret. You scrub, scrape, and pretend not to gag. Still, as awful as the work is, you notice something strange. There's rhythm to it. Everyone's busy. Everyone's needed. No one's just lying around scrolling through a rune-inscribed iPad. You get things done, or you go without. Viking society wasn't just all raiding and rowing, it was deeply domestic, structured, and community-based. Men wove ropes, women hunted birds, kids tended livestock. Gender roles existed, sure, but they flexed more than you'd expect. Historians still argue about the extent of women's labor roles. Some say they did everything but sail, others argue they sailed too, and just didn't brag about it afterward. You pause, wipe sweat from your brow, and realize the sun's already halfway across the sky. Someone shouts that it's time for the midday meal. You toss the soap bucket aside like a war trophy and trudge toward the longhouse, smelling like a goat that lost a bet. At least lunch can't be worse than goat-wrangling, right? Lunch, as it turns out, is not much of a reward, but at least it doesn't bite. You squeeze back inside the longhouse, ducking under a wooden beam that someone probably cracked their head on this morning. The air is thicker now, filled with smoke, body heat, and the smell of barley gruel reheated for the third time today. You sit cross-legged near the hearth, joining the slow-moving circle of villagers returning from their own morning battles with mud, animals, and grumpy in-laws. The midday meal is humble, a communal pot of broth thickened with barley, flavored with whatever bones were boiled into it. You get a piece of dried fish, too, chewy as leather, saltier than betrayal, and possibly older than you. Still, you tear into it like it's roasted duck. Hunger adds seasoning. You share a carved wooden spoon with your younger sibling. They keep licking it between bites. You try not to think about it, like germs are a modern worry. Here, it's called building character. Someone passes around a chunk of marrow bone, split open with an axe. You scoop out the gelatinous treasure with the tip of your knife and slurp it down. It's greasy, rich, and weirdly satisfying. Vikings loved marrow. It was a delicacy, a calorie bomb, and, according to your grandmother, a food that made strong babies. Whether that's true or not, you're already eyeing a second scoop. Your neighbor shows off a honeycomb chunk she got in trade from a passing traveler. It's barely the size of your palm, but everyone stares like she's holding solid gold. She breaks off tiny pieces for the children. You get none. Your cousin gets 2. Around you, the chatter flows like ale at a feast. only quieter, with more side eyes. Topics bounce from crop failures to rumors of a nearby raid, to that one thrall who keeps whispering to trees. No one's sure if he's cursed or just lonely. You learn that someone's sister is pregnant, someone's sheep is missing, and someone else found a carving in the woods that looks suspiciously like the god Loki, grinning. Of course, historians still argue whether the Vikings truly feared Loki as a trickster, or secretly admired him for being cleverer than everyone else. Either way, no one's sleeping near that carving tonight. After eating, the adults move on to more chores, but the children, if their hands are clean and their voices quieter than a mosquito, are allowed to stay and listen, because now comes the storytelling. Your grandfather leans forward, pokes the fire, and begins weaving a saga. It's the tale of a hero who slayed a sea serpent with only a nail and a prayer. You've heard it 20 times, but somehow it never gets old. Maybe it's the way he growls the monster's voice, or how he spits dramatically every time he says sea foam. Stories are the glue of your village. They're entertainment, history, warning, and wishful thinking all bundled together. You don't have books. You don't need them. You have voices, memory, and exaggeration. But the break is short-lived. Chores are calling, loudly, specifically, your mother calling your name. It's time for your actual assignment. You stand up, brush crumbs from your tunic, and follow her out the longhouse door, squinting into the midday sun. Shadows stretch across the grass like lazy wolves. Your job for the next few hours is one of several, depending on the rotation. Maybe you're helping tan hides, a process that involves soaking animal skins in urine to soften the flesh. It's as glamorous as it sounds. You hold your breath. You fail. You cry. A little. Or perhaps you're weaving, hands rough from spinning coarse wool on a drop spindle while your aunt critiques every lump. She's kind, but brutally honest. She once told your cousin her thread looked like it had been chewed by a blind cat. You're not sure she was joking. If you're lucky, you're on fishing net duty, less smelly than tanning, and mostly done outdoors, where the breeze offers mercy. You sit near the shallows, knotting flax cords, watching birds circle overhead. You pause to look at your hands, calloused, scraped, filthy, strong. You're starting to understand that Viking life is not about glory. It's about function, about doing what needs doing every single day. You think of the raiding stories told in sagas, heroes with axes, ships on fire, gold in heaps. But here in your village, real courage looks like scraping hide, fixing nets, and showing up to work every morning with sore feet, and a smile that's only slightly fake. A dog barks in the distance. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of seaweed and wet moss. You inhale deeply. It's not pleasant, but it's familiar, and you have work to do. You return to the longhouse with your arms full of flax, your fingers raw from spinning, and your stomach already wondering how many hours until the next meal. The sun has begun its slow descent, casting long amber light across the village, which only means one thing. You're not done yet. The longhouse is buzzing. Someone is boiling water. Someone else is pounding grain with a stone pestle. Children dart through the door with sticks and pebbles, pretending to be raiders or wolves. It's hard to tell which. One of them screams dramatically and collapses onto the floor. No one blinks. You slide back onto your usual spot near the hearth and take stock of your surroundings. This building, this creaking, smoky, half-lit wooden beast is the heart of your world. It's not just a house, it's everything. It's where you eat, sleep, work, argue, cry, heal, get married, give birth, and die. It's a workshop, a nursery, a gathering hall, and sometimes, if the weather's good and the goats behave, it even feels like home, built from timber and sod. The longhouse is long, obviously, rectangular, and cleverly designed. Thick wooden posts form its bones. The roof is covered in turf, and although it leaks when the rain is stubborn, it also insulates better than you'd think. The walls are daubed with mud and straw, patched in places with driftwood or whatever material was on hand the day the wall needed fixing. There's no interior privacy, no bedrooms, no walls. At best, the head of the household might sleep behind a curtain or a carved wooden screen. Everyone else gets a spot on the floor, near the hearth if they're lucky, near the door if they're not. Along one side of the wall runs a built-in bench, topped with straw, fur, and old woolen blankets. It's both a seat and a bed, depending on how tired you are. That's where your grandmother naps during the day and tells stories at night, sometimes both at once. Down the center runs the fire pit, low, narrow, and always smoldering. There's no chimney, just that smoke hole in the roof. The smoke clings to everything, your clothes, your hair, your dreams. Your cousin once said she could smell the hearth even in her sleep. You believe her. Above the rafters, meats and herbs hang to dry. Fish skins sway gently. You try not to think about the time a squirrel got in and feasted on your winter sausages. That was a dark week. The hearth is sacred. You keep it burning, not just for warmth, but because to let it go out is to invite misfortune. Every household has its own customs. Some whisper a blessing each morning. Some leave offerings, tiny bits of food, a feather, a carved bone. No one really agrees on what works, but no one's willing to risk skipping it. Historians still argue whether these hearth customs were religious, magical, or just deeply ingrained habit. But to you, the fire feels alive, temperamental, hungry, comforting, a god or a ghost, or both. You glance up. The rafters are thick with soot. Someone carved runes into the beam above the hearth. Old names, maybe, or protective spells. You can't read all of them yet, but one looks like a stylized fox. Your sister says that's for luck in hunting, or to ward off lice. It depends on which aunt you ask. Near the back, beside the stored grain sacks, your uncle is sharpening a knife on a whetstone. The rhythmic scrape adds to the soundtrack of the longhouse. Fire crackling, water boiling, quiet murmurs, the occasional goat bleating from outside. You're sent to mend a woolen sock, which involves more stabbing your own thumb than actual stitching. The wool is rough, the thread is uneven, and your needle is made from a sliver of bone that's seen better centuries. But still, you manage. Vikings were resourceful. If something broke, you fixed it. If it couldn't be fixed, you turned it into something else. There's a rhythm to this house, a shared breath, a communal heartbeat. You might be irritated with your cousin one moment and sharing food with her the next. You might sleep beside someone who snores like a dying walrus, but still reach over to make sure they're warm enough. Everyone is close, too close, sometimes. But in a world of storms, wolves, and uncertain gods, there's safety in noise, safety in being surrounded. You don't have walls, but you have each other. Someone stirs the pot. The scent of boiling cabbage joins the smoke. Someone else breaks into song, an old tune, no real words, just the melody passed down through generations. You hum along, almost without thinking. The longhouse is crowded, noisy, smoky, drafty, and somehow it's still your favorite place in the world. Afternoon hits its stride in the village, not that you have a sundial or a wristwatch to tell you. Time here is measured by light, chores, and how many times you've stubbed your toe on a loose floor plank. You're outside now, your task shifting to a more interactive experience, milking the goats. The goats are not pleased. One of them eyes you like it remembers that time you tripped into the trough, and it hasn't forgiven you. Another is chewing on your tunic string while you try to position a wooden pail beneath her belly. Milking is supposed to be calming, like churning butter, like petting a dog. This is not that. You crouch, reach in, and hope she doesn't kick you in the ear again. Some days, the milk flows easily. Today she's playing hard to get. Still, a few trickles fall into the pail. You can hear them pattering softly as she shifts her weight, plotting your demise. The goats are strange creatures, full of opinions and surprisingly sharp hooves. Your neighbor leans over the fence to offer advice. Talk to her gently, she says. She likes compliments. You try this. You tell the goat she's strong, independent, possibly descended from the sacred herd of Hadrun herself, the she-goat of Valhalla, who produces endless mead. The goat sneezes on you. You finish with a modest pail of warm milk and a new scratch on your shin. Victory. Nearby. The women gather in a half circle under the eaves of a barn, spinning flax into thread, carding wool, and sharing news. Some true, some embroidered more than the tunics they're working on. You join in, pulling out a spindle, the fibers tugging between your fingers like wisps of cloud. The rhythm is soothing. Spin, drop, twist, wind. You're not good at it, but you're not the worst, and that's enough. The village isn't about being perfect. It's about pulling your weight and not stabbing yourself in the palm with your spindle. While you work, the gossip rolls. Someone says the Jarl's daughter has a new necklace carved from walrus tusk. Someone else insists it's bone, not tusk, and was actually meant for the Jarl's wife. Someone suggests it was a gift from a Christian merchant. Gasps all around. You don't know what's worse, giving gifts to the wrong woman or converting to Christianity. Another woman shares a story about a dream she had. A raven flew backward through the longhouse, then perched on a goat's head. She's convinced it's an omen. Her sister disagrees. It probably just means she ate too many dried mushrooms before bed. Historians still argue how seriously dreams were taken in Viking society. Some believe they guided major decisions. Others think they were mostly late-night entertainment with a side of paranoia. You mentioned that you heard the smith's wife whispering to a carved log by the river last week. Everyone pauses. Ah, says your aunt, nodding wisely. She's trying to summon the forest spirits, or she's just lonely. Hard to tell. The line between the mundane and the mystical is a smudge here. Superstition is stitched into daily life as tightly as wool into cloaks. You don't walk backward through doorways. You avoid cutting your nails after dark. You definitely don't mention the Draugr, revenants said to crawl from graves at night when the sun begins to dip. The conversation shifts to food. Always food. The harvest was fair this year. Not great. Enough. The pickled herring won't last through winter. So, there's talk of salting more cod. Your cousin claims her mushroom broth can cure coughs and heartbreak. She's wrong about the heartbreak, but it does make your ears feel warm. You glance around at the women working beside you, some young, some old, all busy. Their hands are raw, their backs bent, their feet cracked, but their voices are strong. They know every herb, every story, every danger, every cure. Some are healers, some are seers. Some just know how to scare kids into behaving with a well-timed glare. In your village, women are not just wives or mothers. They're planners, keepers, warriors in the slow battle of survival. One woman here once chased off a wolf with a pitchfork. Another birthed twins during a thunderstorm and then churned butter the same afternoon. No one here has time for fragility. You joke, sure, you tease, but you also watch, you learn, as the sun begins to soften in the sky. Your arms are tired, your tunic is streaked with goat slime, and your fingers ache from twisting thread. You stand, stretch your back, and take a deep breath of barn-scented air. Somewhere, a child shrieks with joy or terror, possibly both. You head back to the Longhouse. There's still time before the evening meal, and still much left to do. Evening edges closer, but in a Viking village, the workday doesn't end just because the light begins to fade. If anything, this next bit might be the riskiest part of your day, depending on your task: fishing, fowling, or something involving sharp metal and too much confidence. You've been assigned to food gathering. Again. Today that means checking the eel traps your uncle set by the shallows 2 days ago. You're not alone. Your cousin tags along, carrying a spear too large for him and far too much enthusiasm for something that might involve leeches. You trudge toward the marshy edge of the river, boots squelching in wet moss. The reeds sway gently, hiding who knows what: frogs, birds, or the occasional very irritable badger. The sky's turning a little orange now, reflected in the ripples of dark water. It's pretty, until the wind shifts, and you catch a whiff of something rotting nearby. You try not to breathe too deeply. The traps are woven from willow and baited with fish guts. Glamorous, right? You kneel, gingerly pulling one from the water. It sloshes, drips, and wiggles. Something's in there. You both peer inside. Success. A fat, slithering eel, still alive and offended by your presence. You hate eels. Everyone does. But they're full of protein and easy to dry for winter. So, you grin like a warrior holding a dragon's head and dump it into a bucket. 2 more traps. 2 more eels. And 1 very unimpressed water snake later. You're ready to head back. Your cousin insists he fought the snake. You know he screamed. But sure, let him have it. Fishing is often romanticized in stories. Heroic men braving the sea, pulling up bounty from the deep. In reality, it's you, your wet boots, and eel-slime on your sleeves. Still, it's better than missing a meal. Sometimes the food hunt is less wet and more feathered. Birding in Viking territory takes stealth, patience, and the ability to hold your sneeze while lying face down in a bog. You wait. You throw stones. You set snares. Occasionally, you catch something. Occasionally, it flies off with your snare. You return to the village just as someone blows a hollowed horn to signal evening preparation. The sound rolls across the huts and hills, low and vibrating, like a sleeping bear's yawn. You drop off your bounty, still squirming, and try not to think about whether that snake is still in your cousin's bucket. As you pass the forge, You hear the rhythmic clang of iron meeting iron. The blacksmith is still at it, shirtless and steaming, as sparks fly from his anvil. He's reshaping a broken axe head. You stop to watch for a moment. The process is almost hypnotic. Strike, rotate, strike again. Iron glows like lava before fading into dull steel. Viking villages weren't filled with just warriors. Craftsmen like him were essential. Without them, there'd be no tools, no weapons, no horseshoes, no hinges. Some say a skilled blacksmith was more valuable than a shield biter in battle. Historians still argue about how advanced Viking metallurgy really was, but here, in this smoky shed filled with sparks and sweat, it feels like magic. The smith nods at you. You nod back. It's the kind of mutual respect only shared by people who've both smelled like burnt fish this week. You head toward the communal grain shed, where others are grinding barley using stone querns. It's slow, dusty, shoulder-aching work. You take a turn, rotating the top stone in small, painful circles. The powdery meal falls into a woven basket below. If you sneeze now, you'll be coughing up flour until next week. The sound of birds overhead reminds you that the forest isn't far, and neither are its dangers. Wolves, bears, and other hungry things are always watching the village's edges. You once saw a boar charge a drying rack and make off with an entire side of smoked venison. You still bring that up whenever someone complains about you sneaking a honey cake. You pause by the boundary fence, where some of the older boys have gathered. They're practicing spear throws, aiming at a carved wooden post. Most of the throws go wide. One sticks. The others all cheer like it's the first time they've seen such a thing. Honestly, it might be. Combat training is part of life here. Even for those who won't ever raid across the sea. The village needs protectors, even if the only threat this week is a rogue goat. You pick up a spear and try a throw yourself. It thuds into the dirt. Respectable-ish. One of the boys challenges you to a wrestling match. You decline, citing eel-related exhaustion and moral superiority. The sun is starting to dip now, casting the whole village in a golden glow. Smoke rises from the cooking pits. Dogs bark, children laugh, and someone swears at a broken cartwheel. A breeze carries the scent of roasting onions and wet thatch. You've worked, fished, fetched, and survived. It's time for dinner. The sun slinks down behind the treetops, dragging the shadows long and lazy across the village. Golden light gives way to smoky blue, and the breeze carries that perfect blend of wood smoke, wet wool, and burnt onions. It's dinner time, or as close to a feast as a regular Viking evening gets. But before you eat, there's one more chore. The thing, not a vague thing. The thing, the village assembly, a meeting of minds, fists, and loud opinions. You're not sure why you've been dragged along. You're too young to vote, too old to be ignored, and just curious enough to get yourself in trouble if you talk. So you keep quiet and trail behind your father and uncles as they make their way to the meeting circle, set just past the edge of the main dwellings, near a flat patch of land ringed with stones. The thing isn't just about governance. It's where disputes are settled, land rights debated, and neighbors loudly argue about fences and fish traps. Think of it as Viking small claims court, but with more shouting and less paperwork. Today, the complaint is about a pig, a very bold, very fat pig that wandered into someone else's barley plot and ate with the enthusiasm of a Viking at a wedding feast. The owner insists the pig acted of its own free will. The barley grower demands compensation. A third person, entirely unrelated, claims the pig is actually cursed. The crowd murmurs. One man claps. Another throws a pine cone. The law speaker, an older man with a voice like sand and a memory like a runestone, begins reciting relevant precedents. These aren't written anywhere. He just remembers them. Viking law was oral, passed down from elder to elder. Historians still argue whether some of it was invented on the spot, especially when pigs were involved. Eventually, a compromise is reached. The barley grower gets a goat, the pig gets a new pen, and the accused gets a new nickname. Pig speaker. You try not to laugh. You fail. But it's not all comedy. Sometimes, the thing handles darker matters. Someone whispers that a neighboring village had a theft, tools gone missing, tracks in the snow, a cloak caught on a branch. If the culprit's found, it won't go easy. Punishments here range from fines to exile to, well, worse. Justice is swift, but not always merciful. Still, the thing is a cornerstone of Viking life, proof that even in a world of axes and raids, debate and community held power. You head back to the Longhouse with that odd blend of pride and unease swirling in your gut. By the time you return, dinner is already underway. The Longhouse is aglow, not just with firelight, but with laughter, conversation, and the loud chewing of people who've earned every bite. Tonight's meal is better than usual. Stew thickened with barley, onions, and some sort of bird that might have once been a goose, or possibly a very large duck with an attitude problem. There's flatbread too, charred just enough to remind you of last week's fire mishap. You scoop your portion into a wooden bowl and huddle near the hearth, knees tucked under your chin. The heat feels good on your face. The stew, while slightly gritty, is hot and filling. You dunk your bread, suck marrow from a shared bone, and chase it with a mouthful of warm, sour ale. Someone tells a joke about a one-eyed goat who joined a raid. It makes no sense, but the delivery's perfect. You laugh anyway. The dogs bark at something outside. No one flinches. Just another fox. Probably. You glance around and take it in. Your grandmother rubbing her knees. Your uncle recounting a trade gone wrong. Your cousin feeding bread to the dog under the table. This is the heart of the village. Not the walls or roofs or laws, but the people gathered in the glow of the fire, sharing food, stories, and heat. The meal winds down slowly. Someone starts playing a lyre, plucking out a tune that's older than any of you. You hum along softly, the notes slipping around the room like warm air. Eventually, you help clean up, licking spoons, stacking bowls, and tossing scraps to the pigs. Yes, even that pig. He's back. He looks smug. The fire is stoked one last time. The pot is scraped clean. A few coals are set aside in a clay pot to keep embers overnight, just in case the main fire dies. You don't want to wake up to a cold hearth and angry ancestors. You let out a long breath and stretch your arms. Your tunic smells like stew, smoke, and possibly eel. Your legs ache. Your hands are dirty. And you wouldn't trade it for anything. Dinner's done, but the night is just beginning. With dinner finished and your belly just full enough to fend off dreams of roasted lamb and honey cakes, the Longhouse shifts into its evening rhythm, a slower, softer pulse. The clang of tools fades, replaced by the crackle of the hearth and the occasional snort from someone already dozing with their mouth open. But bedtime isn't on the agenda just yet. As the fire settles into glowing embers, Someone retrieves a worn animal hide folded carefully beneath a bench. It's unfurled with ceremony, revealing painted images, dragons, longships, and spear-wielding warriors drawn in red and black ink. A saga begins. The voice that carries it is old, slow, and just raspy enough to make every word sound like it's been dragged through gravel. It's your great-uncle, the same man who once broke a thief's nose with a ladle and then kept cooking. His stories are long, full of impossible heroes and bloodthirsty giants. And he never tells them the same way twice. Tonight, it's the tale of Hrolf the Bonebreaker, a man so strong he once carried his own longship across a frozen fjord. Or so the story goes. You've never quite believed that part, but the way the adults nod solemnly as he tells it makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, he really did. You sit with the others, shoulders touching, eyes wide in the flickering firelight. The younger children press closer, gasping at each twist, giggling at the naughty bits, and jumping whenever the storyteller's voice drops to a whisper. Then comes the music. A lyre is passed around. Someone picks out a melody, slow and sweet. Others hum. One woman taps rhythm on a wooden bowl. You're not exactly a bard, but you try to join in, softly, under your breath. The tune is ancient, and you've heard it since before you could walk. It weaves through the rafters like smoke. This, more than anything else, is how memory survives. No books, no quills, just the rhythm of voice and song. Historians still debate how much of Viking history was preserved accurately this way. Some argue it was all stylized fiction. Others say that oral culture had better memory than we give it credit for. Either way, it feels real when the room falls quiet for the hero's death. Someone sneezes. A toddler claps. The moment breaks. You shift your weight and glance across the longhouse. In one corner, a young couple sits too close, fingers almost brushing. No one says anything. But a few eyebrows lift. Flirting happens subtly here. There's no privacy. So every glance, every smile is observed. And later, disgust. You recall how your cousin met her husband. He spilled fish guts on her by accident and apologized with a carved bone pendant. She pretended to hate it. Now she wears it every day. Love, Viking style. But not everyone is eager for romance. A woman near the back is busy mending a tunic. Her brow furrowed in deep concentration. Another is grinding dried herbs into powder. She's the midwife, or the closest thing to one. Her pouch rattles with bone charms, dried mushrooms, and things you're better off not asking about. A whisper goes around that one of the women is with child. No one confirms it. Yet, there's magic in the air tonight. Not the kind with sparks and fireballs, but the subtle, heavy kind that clings to silence. A sense that something old is watching. The hearth, the ancestors, maybe even the gods. Viking belief isn't neatly boxed. Sure, you have Thor and Odin and Freya, but you also have spirits of the land, water, and sky. Little things, old things. You leave offerings for them, a coin, a crust of bread, a drop of ale, not because you fear them, but because you live with them. The old woman beside you mutters a charm under her breath before tossing salt into the fire. You ask what it's for. She says it keeps bad dreams away. Or mice. Either way, she says, it's worked so far. Eventually, people begin drifting to their bedding. Not bedrooms, just spaces. A pile of furs, a shared bench, a woven mat near the fire. You claim your usual spot near the wall, close enough to the hearth for warmth, but far enough to avoid being stepped on during the night. The room dims. Shadows grow longer. Snores begin, followed by the gentle thump of someone dropping a ladle. The baby in the corner finally stops crying. For now, you lay back, eyes tracing the dark beams overhead. The sagas swirl in your head. Heroes, monsters, lost loves. You wonder which story tomorrow will bring, and then you hear it. A distant shout, a dog barking wildly, footsteps, fast ones. Trouble? The longhouse stirs again. The peace you'd begun to settle into slips like sand through your fingers. Something is happening. The shout outside is sharp, ragged, real enough to cut through even the deepest snore. You sit up before you're fully awake, heart thumping, eyes squinting toward the longhouse door as more movement stirs around you. Someone bumps into the bench. Someone else trips over the dog. You hear your father grunt, grabbing for his axe with the instinct of a man who never quite trusts peace to last. Outside, another yell, then the unmistakable sound of hooves thudding against packed earth, fast, panicked, and far too close. Stay inside, someone hisses. Right. Good plan. You grab your cousin by the sleeve before he can bolt for the door like a heroic idiot. The longhouse tenses like a held breath. There's no battle horn, no fire in the sky, just urgency, fast footsteps, whispered curses, and the creak of a door finally being flung open. A figure stumbles inside, breathless and soaked in sweat. It's Eric, one of the outer farm hands. His face is pale under the smudges of dirt, and he's gripping the side of the doorway like it's the only thing holding him upright. Strangers, he pants. 3 men came by the coast path, asked for shelter. They've got no gear, no pack animals, just knives and smiles. Knives and smiles. That's never good. Now everyone's wide awake. Strangers are rare. Strangers at dusk, unannounced, with empty hands and sharp weapons. That sets off alarms even before Viking instincts kick in. You live in a time and place where hospitality is sacred, but so is survival. The elder men speak in low voices. Should the strangers be let in, watched, turned away? One woman swears she heard they were traitors. Another insists she saw one mark his face with ash. Bad sign. Possibly a curse. Possibly Christian. Historians still argue whether early Christians in Viking lands were met with curiosity or suspicion. In this case, it's definitely the latter. Your mother pulls you back from the fire. Just in case. You're old enough to be useful, but not old enough to die defending a stew pot. Eventually, the decision is made. The strangers may sit in the communal house at the edge of the village, under guard, no weapons, no lies. If they cause trouble, they'll answer for it. That's how things work here. Justice is swift, communal, and often harsh. A few years ago, a man caught stealing tools was tied to a post with a bucket over his head and left to think about his choices, while the dogs barked at him all night. You're still not sure what was in that bucket. The strangers are led to the far hut, watched by 3 men with spears and 1 woman with a temper. You peer out the slit in the longhouse wall. Just shadows. Nothing more. The tension remains, though, like smoke, it seeps into your bones. To shake it off, you offer to fetch more firewood, not because you're brave, but because the longhouse suddenly feels too crowded. Outside, the air is colder, cleaner. You walk toward the woodpile, glancing back at the silhouettes of your village, every roof dimly glowing from firelight within. You pause by the fence, Owls hoot, the wind rustles the trees, and something unseen scurries through the underbrush. You've walked this path 100 times, but tonight it feels off. You grab a bundle of sticks and turn to head back. Just then, your eye catches something small glinting near the base of a tree, a pendant, bronze, nothing valuable, but strange to see it here, in the dirt, away from the village. You pocket it without thinking. Might be nothing, might be something. Either way, it's not staying out here tonight. Back inside, the atmosphere has shifted again. The adrenaline's fading. The fire's brighter. Someone's telling a joke you've heard 12 times. And this time, it's even funnier. People laugh, louder than necessary. But that's the point. Relief is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive quietly. It bursts through the door and throws its shoes off like a drunk uncle. Your father claps your shoulder. Your cousin offers you the last piece of bread, which is probably a trap, but you take it anyway. You settle back near the hearth, the fire painting gold on everyone's faces. The room is warm again, not just from heat, but from shared survival, from the unspoken acknowledgement that even on the quietest nights, the world beyond the village fence is sharp, unpredictable, and always watching. Still, for now, you're safe. Outside, the stars appear, glittering cold and ancient above the thatched roofs. The strangers are locked away. The fire is strong. The stories are flowing again. And you, tired, smoke-scented, wary but still breathing, stretch out under your blanket of wool and straw. You made it through another Viking day. Probably. By the time you wake, the strangers are gone, not dead, just gone, slipped away before dawn, leaving nothing behind but half-burned embers in the guest hut and a suspiciously well-whittled stick shaped like a bird. Your uncle says they were spies. Your aunt insists they were lost fishermen with good bone structure. You decide to pretend it was elves. It makes the morning less annoying, but there's no time to linger on mysterious visitors, because today is craftwork day. And for you, that means carpentry. Your least favorite. You start by fetching your tools, a blunt knife, a battered mallet, and a chisel that's seen more splinters than sense. You've been told to help repair a broken stool, which sounds easy until you discover the stool in question was previously used as a weapon during a drunken wrestling match. It has teeth marks from both participants. You sit cross-legged in the workshop shed, rubbing your thumb along the grain of the replacement leg. Wood is precious here. Vikings didn't waste timber, not when driftwood was rare. Imports were expensive, and some settlements, especially in Iceland, had so few trees they practically named the last one standing. The first few cuts are clean enough, then the chisel catches, the mallet slips, and you nearly split your thumb open. Again. Hold it like you respect it, your grandfather mutters, not looking up from his own carving. He's shaping the prow of a toy boat for one of the toddlers. His hands move like the tools are just extensions of his fingers. Smooth, steady, silent. You, meanwhile, are already bleeding into the shavings. Still, you try again. Cut, tap, shape. It's slow work. But this is how longships start, not with glory, not with sails and singing, but with wood chips in your lap and blisters in places you didn't know you had. Nearby, your cousin is heating iron rivets in a small forge, crafting hinges for a door that barely keeps the goats out. You ask if he likes it. He shrugs. Better than dung duty. Hard to argue. Outside, The smith's apprentice is shaping nails, each one hammered by hand, each one precious. There are no factories here, no hardware stores. Every nail is a little act of stubbornness against time. Crafting is core to the Viking world. You don't just import what you need, you make it. Bows, arrows, plows, pots, combs, sleds, spoons, skis. Your grandmother once carved a fully functional spindle from a deer antler and dared anyone to call it ugly. No one did. She still uses it. Historians love to talk about Viking ships, and fair enough. They were marvels of engineering. But that same craftsmanship trickled down to the smallest daily tools. A carved bead, a shaped pin, a box with an elaborate latch, all functional, all art, and not all work is hard labor. Across the yard, a group of women sit under a stretched linen canopy, embroidering a tapestry. The scene is vivid. Warriors in battle, longships on waves, serpents with gaping maws. You can almost hear the swords clashing. It's beautiful, and not just for show. This is how you record things. Memory made of thread. You stop to watch, fascinated. Your fingers may not be suited for fine work, but there's something magical about seeing a story emerge, stitch by stitch. One woman catches your gaze. "Want to try?" she asks. You hesitate. Then you sit. She hands you a needle and shows you the motion. Under, through, tighten, repeat. You mess up immediately. She chuckles, fixes it, and keeps going. Turns out, you're better at embroidery than carpentry. Who knew? Midway through the afternoon, a trader arrives, a man from a nearby village, hauling a cart full of furs, wax, and salt. The entire village stirs at once. Trade means news, and possibly licorice root. You watch from a distance as he barters with your uncle. 2 bundles of cured hide for a chunk of amber, 3 clay pots for beeswax, 1 polished soapstone bead that makes your aunt clutch her necklace a little tighter. The trader says he passed through a port where Christians have built a chapel. Stone walls, no roof yet. He says the walls ring like thunder if you shout inside. People murmur. Some shake their heads. Others glance at the sky, just in case Thor heard that and is offended. Historians still argue how quickly Christianity spread through Norse settlements. Some places converted slowly, blending old and new gods. Others swapped idols overnight. Here, it's still mostly the old ways, but stories like this stir something quiet and uncertain in the air. By late afternoon, the trader leaves, and the workshop chores wind down. You survey your work, 1 slightly lopsided stool, 2 mangled blisters, and 3 blood-stained wood chips. Victory. You wash your hands in a basin of rainwater, dry them on your tunic, and stretch your aching back. Someone calls for help skinning a rabbit. You pretend not to hear. Instead, you grab a crust of bread from the windowsill and sneak around the side of the longhouse to sit in the shade. You chew, quietly, staring at your hands, calloused, scraped, and, just faintly, ink-stained from your one attempted stitch. Maybe you're not a hero or a raider, but you're definitely a Viking. The lull of the afternoon has settled into your bones like warmth from the hearth, until someone hands you a screaming child, not yours, obviously. You're not even old enough to be married, let alone parent material, but your aunt is elbow deep in gutting a fish, and your grandmother's gone off to find the missing butter churn, again. So guess who gets babysitting duty? You hold the toddler awkwardly, like someone gripping a live eel. He's damp, furious, and inexplicably sticky. You bounce him a little meow. He screams louder. You try singing. He screams angrily. This is the closest you've come to battle all day. Eventually, you distract him with a carved wooden horse. He gnaws on it with alarming dedication. Peace. For now. Around you. The longhouse begins its late-day rhythm. The main chores are winding down. People clean tools, wash up, stitch repairs into torn tunics, or tend to children who are slightly cleaner than the one you're holding. In the back corner, the midwife is busy. A woman lies on a bed of furs, her face flushed, belly round. Her mother is beside her, murmuring softly. The midwife works without drama, arranging bundles of herbs, boiling water, and unrolling a length of tightly wound linen. Childbirth in a Viking village is a risky business. You know this. Everyone does. There's no hospital, no medicine beyond what the land provides, and very little margin for error. Yet somehow, women do this over and over, wrapped in strength, soot, and silence. You watch, just for a moment, before turning away. Not your place. Next to the midwife's supplies is a pouch of charms, small bones, carved symbols, bundles of herbs wrapped in red thread. Historians still debate whether these were spiritual protections or folk medicine. But here, no one separates the two. Magic and healing walk hand in hand. You think of what your aunt once said. There are things we can fix with tools and herbs, and there are things only the gods can fix. Best to have both on hand. In a quieter corner of the room, two older children are telling stories to a group of toddlers. You inch closer, still holding your sticky hostage. And then the sea serpent rose up, teeth like spears, eyes glowing red, and hissed. "Who dares disturb my cave?" The children gasp. One buries his face in his blanket. Another punches the storyteller in the arm and demands to know if the serpent eats goats. "No," the storyteller says. "Just very bad children." The gasps intensify. You nod in approval. Quality scare tactics. As the toddler finally falls asleep in your lap, chewing on your sleeve, naturally, you lean back against the timber wall and listen to the village breathe. Behind the clamor of animals and chores, there's another rhythm, the quiet kind. A mother humming while weaving, a grandfather whispering blessings into the fire, the crackle of drying herbs above your head. The gentle whisper of lives being lived with no audience, no spectacle, just the soft persistence of survival. You think of the stories you've heard about kings and jarls, warriors who burned halls and conquered far-off lands. But here, in your little village, the real strength sits quietly with her hand on a woman's brow, with a child asleep on her chest, with cracked fingers spinning wool finer than spider silk. You shift the now snoring child carefully to a fur pile and brush straw from your sleeve. Your back aches, your hands are stiff, and still, the evening hasn't quite arrived. Outside, the sky glows the color of aging embers. Chickens rustle in their coop. The goats are silent, which is either a blessing or a sign they're planning something. The quiet is broken by a shriek from the riverbank. Someone shouts. You leap to your feet. No more goats. Please. No more goats. But it's not the goats this time. It's Hilda's youngest, wailing because he fell in the mud chasing a beetle. His siblings are howling with laughter. He's fine, just wet, offended, and very, very brown. You help carry him back. The moment you cross the threshold, someone throws a towel at you. Teamwork. Back inside. The midwife is still at work. The mother is sweating now, gripping the furs with white knuckles. You hear the low chant of a birthing prayer. Old words pass through generations, never written, always remembered, a protective chant, a hopeful one. You stand at the doorway, arms crossed, unsure what to do, so you fetch more water, fold some linens, offer a cup of mead to the grandmother who looks like she hasn't blinked in an hour. The hours pass in this suspended state, where everything is slow and tense, as though the whole village is holding its breath. And then, when the fire is low and the moon has begun its rise, a cry, a new one, high-pitched, sharp, alive. The baby is here. The tension snaps like a twig underfoot. A wave of relief sweeps the room. Someone laughs. Someone else weeps. The midwife wraps the baby in wool and announces, "Boy, strong lungs, already angry." People drift over to glimpse the tiny red face, the tuft of dark hair, the tightly clenched fists. You just exhale. The village has gained one more soul, and with him 100 more chores. Morning brought a baby. Evening brings travelers. Again, you hear the clatter of hooves before you see them. 3 figures on horseback, cloaked and hooded, approaching the village path with slow, measured steps. The animals are thin, dusty, and weary. So are the riders. The horn isn't blown this time. No alarm. No raised weapons. Just villagers pausing what they're doing to stare openly. A visitor is an event. A visitor on horseback is practically a saga. They reach the main clearing, dismount stiffly, and remove their hoods. 2 men and a woman. The older man speaks first, announcing themselves as traders from the coast. Salt, dried fish, antler combs, and news. You notice the gleam of a small cross hanging from the woman's belt? Interesting. Your father offers them water. Your aunt offers bread. You offer nothing, just eyes. You watch the way they look at your longhouse, at the goats, at the sky. Travelers are always seeing things differently, as though your life is part of some strange theater. You wonder if you look like that when you visit other villages. They're given a bench by the fire, and the trading begins. The talk is soft, clipped, full of weighing options and peering into baskets. You drift closer and sit cross-legged by the hearth, pretending to sort herbs, listening. They speak of a settlement across the sea, where stone churches rise beside wooden longhouses, of men in silk robes, chanting in Latin, of coins, not barter, being used for everything, even milk. You glance at your muddy boot and your wooden bowl of onion broth. Milk is supposed to come with elbow grease and a goat's bad attitude. The woman speaks of saints and relics. You half listen, half imagine what it's like to live in a place where houses are made of stone and people don't sleep 6 to a straw mat. Eventually, your uncle brings out the oaths. No trade happens here without at least one hand laid on the oath stone, just a fist-sized river rock, smoothed by time, marked with 3 carved lines. You all swear honesty, even the travelers. It's ceremonial, sure, but it matters. Trust, like iron, must be forged. Barter follows. A carved bone spoon is traded for a flask of honey mead, a woven belt for a salt brick, a goat's horn comb for 2 little wooden saints, pale, delicate, and faintly unsettling. You're drawn to those saints, you've never seen anything like them. No runes, no wild-eyed god with the spear, just sorrowful little faces and smooth robes. The woman sees you looking and smiles. "Do you pray?" she asks. You hesitate? We give thanks to the old gods, to the land. She nods, unfazed. Same sky, different names. That sticks with you. Later, when the visitors have settled into the guest shelter, you sneak back to the longhouse and sit by the fire with your cousin. He picks at his bowl of stew and mutters about southern arrogance. You nod, but your mind is elsewhere. Historians often argue about how Viking communities responded to Christianity, not just when kings converted, but in everyday life. Did people resist it? Blend it? Ignore it until it became useful? Judging by tonight's soft conversations and sideways glances, it's not a war. It's a slow drizzle, changing the soil bit by bit. Your grandmother notices your thoughtful face and nudges you with her elbow. You thinking about gods again? You shrug. They don't care what names we call them, she says, chuckling. They care what we do when the roof leaks. Fair enough. You grab a spindle and begin twisting flax again, your fingers moving on instinct while your thoughts wander. The saints, the stone churches, the songs in Latin. It's all so strange, but not unwelcome. The fire snaps. Sparks fly. Your grandfather begins a new story. This one about a village girl who tricked a troll with a fish and a lie. You grin. A classic. You know how it ends. But still, you listen. Because stories are like visitors. They bring new thoughts, new questions, and the occasional carved saint that makes you stare at your own gods a little longer than usual. You fall asleep wondering what it might feel like to believe in something gentle. You don't sleep long. There's a draft by the door, someone's foot in your ribs, and the unsettling realization that the baby, born just last night, is loud, like vengeful spirit loud. Still, you manage a few hours before the longhouse begins to stir. Dawn light seeps through the cracks in the walls. The embers are still glowing. Barely. You groggily rise, brush straw from your face, and begin your morning trudge outside. As always, it's cold, damp, and vaguely goat-scented. Comforting, in its own unwashed way. Your first task today? Help your uncle patch the storage shed roof. This sounds simple. It is not. The shed is old, warped, and leans like it's whispering secrets to the earth. The roof is made of turf and thatch, which has been peeled away by wind, birds, and the ambitions of a particularly persistent squirrel. You climb up with a bundle of straw, some sod, and the vague hope you don't fall through the beams. Viking roofing is an art, and a science, a wet science. You crawl across slick timbers, cold dew soaking your knees, while your uncle shouts directions from below that mostly consist of, "Not there," and "That's the wrong moss." You try not to look down. It's not high, but it's far enough to sprain something important. You wedge in the straw, press the turf, stomp gently, and slide halfway down the slope, landing in a bush. Your cousin claps. You consider hitting him with moss. By the time you're back on solid ground, you're muddy, bleeding from a thatch-related scratch, and carrying a deeply personal grudge against roofing. You return to the longhouse to clean up and find it's already buzzing. The traders are packing up. They've done their business and are heading north. You wish you could follow, just for a day, just to see what stone churches look like up close. But your place is here, and your tasks aren't done. One of them hands you something before they go. A tiny glass bead, green as seaweed, looped on a bit of sinew. "For luck," she says, smiling. You blink, nod, whisper thanks. You won't wear it. Not yet. It's too strange, too shiny, too not from here. But you tie it to your belt and keep it close. After they leave, the village feels smaller somehow, like everything has shifted an inch to the left. You're not sure if that's good or bad. You spend the rest of the morning helping gather seaweed from the shoreline. Not glamorous, but useful. Dried. It feeds the sheep. Soaks into compost. Even ends up in soup. Though you try not to think about that. You work alongside the same people every day. Neighbors. Cousins. People you've known since you could walk. You know who complains about sore knees. Who sings while working. Who cheats during shell collecting contests. It's always Bjorn. At lunch, the mood is quiet. Not solemn. Just thoughtful. The arrival and departure of strangers always leaves a strange echo. You eat smoked fish and barley cake. Someone brings out a honeycomb shard. You get a taste this time. It sticks to your teeth and makes the world taste better for 5 whole minutes. Afterward, it's back to the fields. You help dig up last season's rotting cabbage to make room for planting. It smells like old feet and disappointment. Your cousin throws one at you, you retaliate. A brief but honorable vegetable war breaks out. Then come the tools. Rakes. Hoes. Bent sticks with iron tips. You till the soil. Clods heavy and reluctant. The ground is stiff from the frost, but slowly it yields. Someone finds a beetle the size of a walnut. Another uncovers an old bone. Everyone pauses. Animal? Someone asks. Your uncle inspects it. Let's say yes. Historians still argue whether Vikings had formal rituals for agriculture or just muttered something vaguely respectful at the dirt. Here. Someone tosses a coin into the soil. Silver. Chipped. Probably Roman. It's not about logic. It's about habit. Protection. Luck. You work until your arms ache. Then a bit more. The sun climbs, dips, disappears behind clouds. You return to the village with dirt under your nails, sweat down your back, and half a cabbage in your tunic because it looked edible. Back in the longhouse, the mood lightens again. Someone plays a game, throwing knucklebones and guessing numbers. The stakes are low, dried berries, a song, a dare. You lose quickly. You're dared to sing. You do, and forget the words halfway through. They laugh, not unkindly. You sit by the fire afterward, legs stretched out, back against the wall. Your hands are sore. Your face is tight from sun and wind. And yet, you're content. You patched a roof. You dug a field. You sang a song. You did Viking things. Not the raiding, the glory, the fantasy, but the quiet things, the sticky, smoky, splintery stuff of life. And you survived another day. Night creeps in like a cat, soft-footed and full of secrets. By the time you've finished rubbing the last of the dirt from your fingernails with a twig, the sky has turned a deep, smoky indigo. The longhouse glows from within like a lantern buried in the earth. Outside, the wind hums low, brushing against the walls with a tune only the moss understands. Dinner is simpler tonight. Turnip stew and a few hard oat cakes. Someone tried to make butter, but it didn't take. Which is Viking for, it turned into something gray and haunted. You chew slowly, not because it's satisfying, but because it's warm. Across the fire, a few teens are whispering. One of them nudges the other, then glances your way. You pretend not to notice. You're not particularly charming. You have dirt in your ears, a bruise on your shin, and you've been wearing the same tunic for 3 days. But in a village of 35 people, romantic standards flex. After dinner, there's a pause, a lull, the kind that pulls people to the fire not out of duty, but because the dark outside feels thicker than usual. That's when someone brings out the runes. They're carved on small stones, some smooth river pebbles, others jagged chips of old bones. The seer, a wiry old woman with eyes like iron nails, sits cross-legged and invites questions. Not answers, just questions. She casts the runes like a handful of chicken teeth. They clatter against the wood, scatter, spin. One man wants to know if his cough means he's dying. Another asks about his missing pig. Someone, laughing, asks if a jarl's daughter will fall in love with him. The seer raises one eyebrow and says only, "Unlikely, unless you are the pig." Laughter bubbles. It's the good kind. The kind that settles in your ribs and eases the tension you didn't realize you were holding. When it's your turn, you hesitate. Then you ask something vague, safe. What happens if I leave this place? The runes fall. The seer studies them, fingers hovering, expression unreadable. You'll find something old, she says, but only if you forget what you were looking for. You blink. What does that even mean? She offers no clarification, just shrugs and sips her tea, which smells like boiled bark and possibly vengeance. You sit back, gaze drifting toward the fire, letting the shadows twist and stretch across the beams above. Nearby, someone starts a slow ballad, an old one, about a woman who married the sea and gave birth to storms. It's haunting, lilting, and sung just off-key enough to feel real. You join the others on the sleeping benches, curling up against the firs, listening to the sound of the village exhaling. But just as your eyes begin to droop, the fire flickers, and someone slides onto the bench beside you. It's the girl from earlier, the one who caught your eye over the barley cakes and goat drama. She doesn't speak, just sits, too close to be accidental, not close enough to be bold. Your heart thumps a little harder. You say nothing. This is how it happens here, not with grand speeches, not with flowers or sonnets, with a glance, a shift of weight, a hand accidentally brushing yours during the distribution of oatcakes. You don't move. Neither does she. Eventually, she lies down beside you, back to back, a thin wall of shared heat between you. It's enough to make your ears burn. The fire crackles low. The village breathes deep. Even the baby is finally quiet. You let your eyes close. You don't sleep yet. Not really. But the feeling is there, looming at the edge of your consciousness. Like the sea you've never seen, but dream about anyway. Before you drift off completely, you think of the runes, of leaving, of staying, of stories written in thread, wood, and bone. You live in a place where nothing is certain. Not the gods, not the weather, not tomorrow's goat behavior. But tonight, someone chose to sit beside you in the dark, and that feels like magic. You wake before dawn again, not because someone kicked you, though that does happen, but because the cold has crept under the furs and found your ankles. The longhouse is dark, still, quiet, except for the usual background noises, someone softly snoring, the baby grumbling like an elderly badger, and the faint crackle of the dying hearth. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the girl still sleeping near you. Her back is to you, hair splayed across her blanket. You resist the urge to speak. You don't even know what you'd say. What would you say? Nice proximity last night? No. Better to just get up and be useful. You shuffle to the hearth, crouch, and gently poke the coals. Still warm? You feed them bits of dried bark and breath, watching them glow back to life like sleepy fire spirits. As light starts leaking through the gaps in the wall planks, the longhouse stretches and stirs. Your morning task today is not glamorous. It's latrine duty. Yes, that's right. The toilet situation. Let's be honest, Viking sanitation is not the part of the sagas they sing about. There's no golden bathhouse with scented herbs. There's a ditch, some distance from the houses, lined with wooden planks, and it smells like consequence. You grab the scoop. It's a flattened, warped ladle attached to a long stick. You consider naming it something dramatic, like Odin's cup. You trudge through the mist to the latrine trench, trying not to breathe through your nose. It's quiet out here, the fog curling around your boots like lost sheep. The earth squelches. Birds mutter in the distance. You reach the trench, brace yourself, and begin your sacred task. You scoop. You dump. You mutter prayers to no particular god. You wonder, not for the first time, if anyone really gets used to this. Maybe that's why the elders always smell faintly of juniper. It's camouflage. Still, you make yourself laugh. Because if you can't find humor while slinging human waste in the dark, when can you? Back at the village edge, you toss the bucket's contents into the compost heap and wash your hands in the stream. You use sand and ash to scrub. It's not perfect, but it's something. The sun has risen by the time you return. The longhouse is fully awake now. Bread is baking on flat stones, and a pot of weak onion broth simmers over the fire. Someone tosses you a slice. It's hot and crisp around the edges. You bite in gratefully. Then your grandmother calls you over. "Help me fix the privy roof," she says. You stare. You just clean the thing. "If we fix it today," she adds, "you won't have to do it again till winter." That's how Viking logic works. Misery now, so you can suffer less later. You grab the tools and follow her out. She's stronger than she looks, and faster. You almost have to jog to keep up. While working, she tells you about the time she fell through the thatch while patching the roof in a storm, broke her arm, finished the job anyway. "You never leave a hole where the cold can crawl in," she says. You nod. Not just about roofs. Probably. By midday. Your hands are covered in moss bits and your arms are sore from holding sod in place while she hammers in wooden pegs. You've never respected a toilet roof more in your life. In the afternoon, you're free. A rare thing. You walk to the hill behind the village, where the burial mounds rise like sleeping giants. The grass is tall here, the breeze constant. You sit beside one of the older mounds, someone you've never met, but whose name you know. Asbjörn, the man who fought 3 wolves and died laughing. There's no shrine, just stones, but you leave a carved bead from your belt anyway. A gift, an offering, or maybe just company. Historians still debate whether everyday Vikings worshipped ancestors actively or just honored them out of tradition. Here, in the quiet, it feels like both. You lie on your back in the grass, stare at the sky, and listen to the wind. You wonder what they'd say, your ancestors, if they'd laugh at your aching arms, if they'd nod at your efforts, If they'd approve of last night's sleeping arrangement, probably not, but you can't ask them. You stay there until the wind grows sharp again, and then you return home. The latrine is no longer your problem today. The trench is clean. The roof is fixed. The air is fresher, and no one noticed, because no one ever does. But that's Viking life, isn't it? Quiet work, dirty hands, aching legs, and the knowledge that even the invisible chores keep the village whole. You barely sit down near the hearth before someone shouts that a storm is coming. You glance outside, nothing but a few lazy clouds and a gust of wind that ruffles your tunic. But the old ones know. They always know. Your grandmother feels it in her bones. Your uncle claims the chickens looked anxious. One of the goats headbutted a post for no reason. That's basically a meteorological emergency. And so, the scramble begins. Everyone jumps into motion. Ropes are tightened. Carts dragged into sheds. Thatch resecured. Children are herded like sheep into the longhouse, despite loud protests. You help tie the shutters closed, your fingers stiff from yesterday's work and today's chill. This isn't just a drizzle. When storms hit Viking villages, they hit hard. Wind like a bear's roar, rain sideways, cold that punches through fur and bone. It can tear a roof off or flood a grain pit. One time, a storm lifted an entire outhouse and dropped it in the goat pen. No one talks about that year. As the first fat raindrops splatter the packed earth, you rush inside, ducking under the low beam and slamming the door flap behind you. The longhouse swells with noise, voices, laughter, the thud of wet boots and the shuffle of straw underfoot. The hearth is already roaring. Someone adds extra logs. Though wood is precious, you sit near it, trying to warm your fingers while pretending not to notice that you're still damp in highly inconvenient places. The wind howls. The walls creak. The shutters bang. And someone shouts from across the longhouse. That was your rope, wasn't it? You pretend not to hear. Then comes the waiting. Storm days are strange. The usual rhythm is broken. There's no farming, no fishing, no wandering off to the woods for suspiciously unsupervised mushroom gathering. You're stuck, with everyone, inside, which means indoor activities. A board game appears. Walnut pieces carved with faces and animal shapes, placed on a scratched wooden grid. You don't remember the rules. You're not sure anyone ever knew them. But the goal seems to involve yelling "thrall" and knocking pieces over dramatically. Your team loses. Badly. You suspect your cousin was cheating but can't prove it. Yet. Someone else pulls out a riddle bag. Yes. A literal bag of carved riddle sticks. One side has the start of the question, the other the answer. You draw one at random and read aloud. What has a mouth but never eats? Before you can answer. 3 people shout, "River!" and a fourth says, "My aunt," which causes an argument that lasts 15 minutes. You love this part of Viking life, not the wet socks, but the togetherness. When the outside world turns wild, the inside becomes a pocket of noise, warmth, and the shared scent of slightly damp humans. The storm thunders on. Rain lashes the turf roof. The goats bleat from their shed. You're secretly impressed it's holding up. Since you helped repair that roof last year, progress. In one corner, your grandmother tells a tale, one you've heard before but would hear 100 more times. It's about a selkie who came to land, stole a man's heart, then stole his boat. The moral? Never trust anything that can hold its breath longer than you. The firelight flickers on her face as she speaks. shadows dancing across the ceiling beams. You stare up at the smoke hole, watching the wisps spiral into the dimness. A gust of wind slams the side of the longhouse hard enough to make the walls shudder. You freeze. Everyone does. Then, slowly, laughter ripples across the room. Someone says, "Thor's bowling again," and the tension melts. You exhale. That's when the roof drips. 1, 2, 3 fat drops. Land right beside you. You grab a bowl, position it beneath the leak, and glance upward like the roof owes you an apology. The wind whistles. A shutter flaps once, then stills. Outside, the world is chaos. Inside, the longhouse hums, alive with voices, fire, and the smell of roasted turnips and wet wool. Not pleasant, exactly, but familiar. You lie back on your mat, arms behind your head. Someone starts humming an old tune, slow and sweet. Your eyes close. The fire warms your feet. The bowl beside you fills, one drip at a time. And for a moment, everything feels right, because storms come and storms pass. But as long as the roof holds and the fire burns, you'll be fine. By morning, the storm is gone, vanished as if it had only stopped by to knock over a few buckets and test the loyalty of your roof. Outside, the ground is a muddy mosaic of hoofprints, broken twigs, and puddles deep enough to contemplate naming. The air smells like wet bark, trampled moss, and relief. You step outside barefoot, just to feel the earth, squish and all. You regret it immediately. It's cold, but storms leave gifts behind. The stream has risen, and with it, a few washed-up treasures. A broken comb made of bone, a cracked piece of red pottery, and a perfectly round river stone that looks like it belongs in someone's palm more than the mud. You collect them all. Maybe they're just junk. Maybe not. You bring them back to the longhouse, where the roof now sports a triumphant patch of fresh moss, where the leak used to drip. Someone added a carved stick to the repair, decorative and also, probably, a prayer. The mood today is lighter. Storms do that. Reset everything. There's more laughter during chores, less grumbling. Even the goat seems less evil. After breakfast, leftover stew and flatbread toasted on the coals, the village gets back to business. You're assigned to help prepare for the coming feast. Yes, a feast. Not a wedding or a war victory, just the end of planting season. A reason to eat slightly more and talk slightly louder. In Viking life, you don't wait for a crown or a conquest to celebrate. You take joy when it's warm, even if the joy smells like pickled fish and smoked cabbage. Your job, assist the cook. This sounds fun. You were wrong. You spend the morning plucking feathers from chickens that didn't survive the night's cold. The smell is specific, sharp, sour, slightly burnt. You gag once. The cook, a woman who could boil leather into soup and make it edible, rolls her eyes. "Use the ash trick," she says, handing you a bowl of wood ash. You rub it on the feathers. They come off easier, and you smell like a campfire in morning. Next, she hands you a pile of root vegetables, already scrubbed but still knobby as troll feet. "Chop those," she says. No fingers. You start slicing with a bone-handled knife so dull it may as well be a spoon. The cook watches you like a hawk, every angle, every twitch of your wrist. You've fought wolves less intimidating than her. Still, you manage, mostly. Then come the herbs, dried bundles hanging from the rafters, angelica, wild onion, yarrow, and the dreaded lovage. You hate lovage, It smells like regret. You grind them together in a stone bowl. The mixture smells strong, earthy, and vaguely medicinal. The cook sprinkles it into the stew, stirs it with a stick as thick as your arm, and mutters something you don't understand. Blessing, she says, for digestion, or diplomacy, or both. Historians still debate how much of Viking cooking involved actual recipes versus sheer survival instincts and luck. Judging by today's soup, it's probably both. You carry the filled pot to the fire, careful not to spill. It's heavy, steaming, and smells better than it has any right to. Someone's roasting apples nearby, rare, sweet, slightly shriveled from storage, but still a treat. The children are gathering twigs for the fire. Someone's playing the lyre again. You hum along without thinking. As midday fades, preparations continue. Benches are arranged around the clearing. A few men build a small stage from 2 barrels and a plank, apparently for entertainment, though no one's exactly clear on who's supposed to perform. You suspect it will involve someone falling off it. Your cousin is brewing ale. Thick, cloudy stuff that smells like barley and ambition. He lets you taste it. You instantly regret this. It tastes like old bread and newer disappointment. He beams with pride. You nod supportively. Before the feast begins, your mother hands you a clean tunic. Change, she says. You smell like storm and chicken. You do. You absolutely do. You scrub your face at the stream, run fingers through your hair, and put on the tunic. It's simple. Undyed wool, patched at the sleeves, a little tight in the shoulders, but it's dry, and that's a luxury today. You return to the village center as the sun begins to dip. The fire is lit high. The stew simmers. The ale is poured. Children are already sticky from early desserts, and the older folks are comparing whose joints ache most after the storm. The goats are tied far, far away from the party this time, and somewhere in the growing crowd, she's there, the girl from before. She catches your eye, smiles, then walks past you with an armful of bowls like nothing happened. You smile back, like it's everything. The feast begins not with a speech, but with a sneeze. Specifically, the Jarl's brother sneezes into his own bowl of stew and then loudly announces that it adds flavor. Laughter ripples through the longhouse. Someone toasts to his health. Another toasts to the health of the stew. The mood is already tipping toward cheerful chaos. You sit near the fire, bowl in hand, knees pulled up, watching steam rise from the soup like a spirit escaping. It tastes better than usual. Probably the herbs. Possibly the shared hunger. There's roasted fish, cabbage with butter, real butter, not the gray almost butter, and flatbread with little flecks of something that might be mushroom. Ale flows freely, not too strong, not like feast ale from the coast, which can unmake a man's decisions in 1 cup, but enough to warm your face and make your tongue feel looser than usual. The fire crackles high, casting long shadows on the beams above. Children chase each other in and out of the flickering light, laughing, falling, occasionally being tackled by dogs and or small goats. One child wears a fur pelt like a cape and insists she's a troll queen. No one argues. Then come the stories. The Jarl stands, ale in one hand, a chicken leg in the other, and declares it's time for words worth remembering. That's code for stories, and subtle bragging. He tells a tale of the time he caught a bear with only a fishhook and stubbornness. You've heard it before. It grows more dramatic each season. This year, the bear speaks fluent Norse and challenges him to a debate. He wins, naturally. Others follow. A woman recounts a sea journey so rough it nearly turned the whole boat inside out. A man swears he once saw a sea serpent blink at him. Another describes a dream of flying through the sky on the back of a wolf made of smoke. And then someone points at you. You freeze mid-sip. You are being volunteered. Tell us something. Your cousin says something true or something close enough. All eyes turn, even hers. You clear your throat, set your bowl down, think fast, and then you tell them the story of the pig who escaped the storm and lived in the forest for a week, only to return fatter and smugger than before. It's mostly true. Mostly, you embellish. You add voices. You describe the pig bartering with squirrels and challenging a fox to a race. People laugh. Even your grandmother chuckles. Just once. But that counts. When you finish, they cheer. Someone refills your cup. Someone else pats your back. And she, yes, she, smiles again. This time she doesn't look away. The games begin next. One is a contest of riddles. Another is a contest of strength, lifting a huge stone from beside the fire and staggering 10 paces. You decline that one. You like your spine unbroken. A third game involves balancing a spoon on your nose while reciting the names of Thor's goats. You don't win. But you're proud you remembered one goat's name, Tooth Gnasher. The other slips your mind. As the night grows late, music drifts in. Someone pulls out a hide drum, another a bone flute, and a third plucks at the lyre like it owes him money. The melodies are rough, lively, a little off-key, but full of heart. People dance, not elegantly, not gracefully, but enthusiastically. You're pulled into the circle before you can protest. Arms link, feet stamp. The floor trembles. You spin, stagger, and nearly fall into the soup pot. It's fine. It's all fine. Eventually, the circle breaks apart into laughter and panting, and the flopping of tired limbs. You fall backward onto a pile of straw, breathless, grinning, and there she is again. She sits beside you, this time deliberately, this time close. Your story, she says. The pig one. You brace yourself for mockery. I liked it. You blink. You did? She nods. But I think the pig would have beaten the fox. You should change that. You nod solemnly. Next time, then, silence falls between you, but a good silence, like a song that's resting between verses. The fire crackles. A child snores nearby. Someone strums the lyre softer now, letting the notes settle into the bones of the house. The feast continues, but slower, sleepier. People lean on each other. One man sings a lullaby no one asked for, but no one interrupts. And you, wrapped in smoke and warmth and the weight of a very good night. Sit beside her and think. This is what joy looks like. Not gold, not glory, just stew, stories, and someone choosing to sit beside you. By the time the fire sinks to glowing coals and the last mug of ale is spilled, the longhouse is full of snoring bodies tangled in cloaks, laughter still echoing faintly in the rafters. The feast is over, though the crumbs, crusts, and cabbage-scented air suggest otherwise. You're not sleeping yet, not quite. You lie on your side, facing the hearth, arms tucked under your head. The room is dim, warm, alive with the soft rustles of people dreaming beside each other. Someone twitches in their sleep. Someone murmurs about fish. The baby, mercifully, is silent. She's still beside you, not touching, just near. Close enough that you can hear her breathing, smell the smoke in her hair, and feel the weight of her presence in the quiet. Neither of you speaks. It's the best kind of silence. You drift, not fully into sleep, but into that hazy space where thoughts soften, where the world slows, where the clatter of the day finally stills. And just as your thoughts begin to blur into dreams, a sound, a knock. No one knocks on a longhouse. There's nothing to knock on, but it's unmistakable. 3 taps on the wooden beam by the door. You're up before you know why. So is your father. So are others. The door is unlatched, opened. It's a man, alone, soaked from head to foot, cloak hanging like seaweed, eyes wild with wind and distance. I come from the coast, he says. His voice is hoarse. His hands tremble. He pauses. Then, there's a ship. That gets attention. A big one, he continues. Landed 2 days ago. Foreign. They speak a tongue like ours, but not. They carry steel and priests. One of them has gold around his neck and talks to no one but the sky. Now everyone is listening. They say they've come to build, to trade, to teach. The room shifts, not in fear, not in excitement, just in that deep communal way a room shifts when something real enters it. He sits, is given stew, a blanket, space by the fire. No one presses him for more. Not yet. You return to your place. You lie back down. But now your thoughts are stirring again. A ship, foreigners, gold, teaching, change. Historians often describe moments like this as turning points. But for you, it's not a chapter title in a dusty book. It's a weight in your stomach, a question curling at the back of your tongue. Will your village change? Will the gods? The food? The songs? Will you? Will she? You glance at her again. She's still awake. You know it without looking, but neither of you says a word. Outside, the wind has died down. Inside, the fire still breathes. And you, curled in wool, heart full of questions, hands still aching from work, realize something strange. You are no longer simply surviving. You are part of something, a story not yet finished, a song with verses still unwritten, and that feels like a beginning. The fire is low now, not out, never out, but calm, gentle, humming quietly in its cradle of ash. The longhouse is gone still. Everyone is asleep, or close enough. Even the goats have stopped planning their inevitable uprising. You lie back, wrapped in wool, muscles softening, breath slowing. You can still feel the heat of the day in your bones, but it no longer aches. It just is. You hear the quiet rhythm of the village sleeping, the creak of the rafters, the shifting of straw, the sigh of someone dreaming about something too far to reach, and above all, the wind outside, soft, like a lullaby hummed by the hills. Tomorrow will bring its own stories, more chores, more spilled stew, another broken fence, maybe a storm, maybe a ship, but not now. Now, there's nothing left to do, no embers to poke, no goats to chase, no words to find, only warmth and stillness. You shift slightly, nestle deeper into the furs, and let your eyes drift shut. Let the longhouse hold you. Let the dark cradle you. Let the last glow of the fire fade into your dreams. You are safe. You are home. And you have lived a day in a Viking village, full of ash and laughter and questions and songs and mud and everything in between. Sleep now. The gods are watching. And the hearth still burns. End of script. Sweet dreams.